Welcome to Story Planet, where every tale is a journey. And tonight, we invite you to a special place, the cottage by the sea. Perched on a quiet cliff, with the sound of waves in the background, this cozy cottage has become a haven for travelers from all walks of life. As you settle in, imagine sitting by the fire, the salty breeze coming in through the windows, as we share the stories of those who have found their way to this beautiful shore. Each visitor has their own unique story, and tonight you're invited to listen, relax, and be transported by their journeys. So, get comfortable. The stories are about to begin. The Lost Hiker. The first traveler to find the cottage was Isabel, a young woman in her mid-20s who had been hiking the coastal trails. She arrived on a foggy afternoon, her clothes damp and her cheeks flushed from exertion. She had lost her way along the cliffs, wandering for hours before stumbling upon the small path that led to the cottage. Martha greeted her at the door, a look of surprise on her face. "You're soaked," she said with concern, ushering Isabel inside. "Come in, sit by the fire. I'll get you something warm to drink." Isabel was grateful for the warmth and the shelter. As she sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, she told Martha how she had been hiking solo for several weeks. "I thought I knew the trail like the back of my hand," she admitted, sipping the hot tea Martha had prepared. "But the fog came in so quickly, I lost my bearings." Martha nodded, understanding completely. "It happens more often than you think," she said. "This stretch of coast can be tricky, especially when the weather turns." Over the next few days, as the fog lingered, Isabel stayed at the cottage. During the mornings, she would join Martha in the garden, helping to prune the lavender and gather herbs. In the afternoons, they would sit by the fire, sipping tea, sharing stories of their lives. Isabel opened up about her need to escape the pressures of her job and personal life. She had always been an adventurer at heart, but somewhere along the way, she had lost herself in the expectations of others. The hike had been her way of finding clarity, but instead, she had gotten lost. Martha listened patiently, offering gentle words of wisdom. "Sometimes, getting lost is exactly what we need," she said. "It forces us to slow down, to stop trying to control everything." By the end of her stay, Isabel found the peace she had been searching for. She left the cottage with a clear mind and a sense of direction, thanking Martha for her kindness. But as she waved goodbye, Martha knew that the young hiker had also left a mark on her heart. Isabel's visit reminded her of her own need for clarity when she first arrived at the cottage. The Wanderer. A month later, Oliver arrived. He was a man in his early 40s, with a rugged appearance and a quiet demeanor. He had been traveling the world for the past 2 years, leaving behind a successful career in finance. The cottage was the last stop on his journey before returning home. Oliver had heard about the cottage from a local fisherman and arrived just as the sun was beginning to set. Martha welcomed him in, offering him a seat at her wooden table, and prepared a hearty meal of freshly baked bread and fish stew. They spoke little that first evening, the silence comfortable between them. Oliver was used to being alone, and Martha respected his need for quiet. But over the next few days, as Oliver helped with small repairs around the cottage, they began to talk. He shared stories of his travels, the people he had met, and the places he had seen. But he also spoke of the disillusionment that had led him to leave everything behind. The corporate world had worn him down, and he had embarked on a journey to rediscover what truly mattered. "I thought I'd find all the answers out there," Oliver said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the sea. "But now, after all this time, I think the answers were inside me all along." Martha smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. "It's not about where you go," she said softly. "It's about what you learn along the way." Oliver stayed longer than expected, helping Martha with the garden and repairs to the fence, enjoying the slow pace of life at the cottage. When he finally left, he was ready to return home, not to his old life, but to a new one filled with purpose and clarity. The Writer in Search of Words. The third traveler was Eleanor, a writer in her late 30s who had come to the coast in search of inspiration. She arrived at the cottage in a state of frustration, her mind blank despite the beautiful surroundings of the seaside village where she had rented a house. Martha invited her in, sensing Eleanor's need for space and understanding. "Stay as long as you need," she said, showing her to the small guest room. "The sea has a way of clearing the mind." Eleanor spent her days walking along the shore, hoping that the sound of the waves would bring the words back to her. She sat by the cliffs, staring out at the horizon, her notebook empty. But slowly, as the days passed, she found herself less focused on writing and more attuned to the beauty around her. The pressure to create faded, replaced by a deep appreciation for the peace she had found at the cottage. One afternoon, as she sat in the garden with Martha, watching the bees buzz around the lavender, the words finally came. Eleanor began to write, filling page after page with new ideas, her story unfolding effortlessly. She realized that the block she had felt wasn't about the writing itself. It was about the expectations she had placed on herself. Before she left, Eleanor thanked Martha for the space to breathe, for the conversations by the fire, and for the simple beauty of life at the cottage. "I think I've found what I was looking for," she said, holding up her notebook. And it wasn't just the words. The elderly couple. John and Margaret arrived at the cottage in early summer, an elderly couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. They had traveled the world together in their younger years, but now preferred quieter, more reflective journeys. The cottage, perched above the sea, reminded them of the simpler times they had once shared. Martha immediately took to the couple, their warmth and affection for one another filling the cottage with a sense of joy. They spent their days walking along the shore, reminiscing about the travels they had once taken, and their evenings sitting on the porch, watching the stars. Margaret with her soft gray hair and gentle smile, told Martha how they had met on a beach, much like the one below the cottage. "We've always felt at home by the sea," she said. "It's where our love began, and it's where we always find peace." John, though quieter, often shared small, poignant stories about their adventures. "The world has changed so much," he said one night as they sat by the fire, "but this kind of peace never changes." Their stay at the cottage was short but sweet, and when they left, Martha felt as if she had been given a glimpse into a life of love and companionship that had endured through decades. It reminded her of the importance of cherishing the small moments, the quiet spaces in life. The painter. Sophie arrived in late autumn, a young artist looking for inspiration. She had heard about the cottage from a friend and decided it was the perfect place to spend a few weeks painting. When she arrived, she was struck by the beauty of the cottage, the way it stood on the cliff, with its wild garden and view of the sea. Martha welcomed Sophie into the cottage, providing her with a warm bed and plenty of space to create. Sophie spent her days outside, painting the cliffs, the waves, and the changing sky. She painted with passion, capturing the essence of the sea in ways that Martha had never seen before. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, Martha knitting while Sophie sketched new ideas for her work. The two women, though from different generations, shared a deep connection through their love of creativity and the natural world. Sophie's time at the cottage was filled with quiet reflection and artistic growth. By the time she left, her canvas was full of vibrant, powerful paintings that reflected not only the beauty of the sea, but also the peace she had found in the small, serene moments at the cottage. The musician in search of silence. One chilly autumn afternoon, a man named Luke arrived at the cottage. He was in his late 30s, with tousled hair, a worn leather jacket, and a guitar case slung over his shoulder. Martha welcomed him with her usual warmth, but she noticed something different about him. Luke's eyes were tired, not just from travel, but from something deeper, something restless. As they sat by the fire that evening, Luke shared his story. He was a musician, a successful one by many standards, but after years of touring and performing, the constant noise of life had become overwhelming. The fame, the crowds, and the relentless pressure to create had left him feeling hollow. He had come to the cottage seeking the one thing he couldn't find on stage: silence. At first, Luke was uncomfortable with the quiet of the cottage, the absence of noise unnerving him. But Martha encouraged him to embrace it, to sit by the sea and listen to the waves, to let the natural rhythm of life wash over him. Slowly, Luke began to relax. He took long walks along the shore, watching the gulls soar and the tide roll in. The constant hum in his mind began to quiet, replaced by the sound of the sea. After a week, Luke finally picked up his guitar. Sitting on the porch, with the sea spread out before him, he began to play, not for an audience, but for himself. The music was soft, reflective, and filled with the peace he had been searching for. Martha listened from inside, a smile on her face, knowing that the cottage had once again provided what was needed. When Luke left, he thanked Martha, not just for the hospitality, but for the gift of silence. "I think I've found the music I've been missing," he said. And with that, he set off, his guitar case lighter, his heart. The photographer capturing silence. One crisp morning, just as the light was beginning to spill over the horizon, Martha heard a soft knock at the door. Standing there was a woman named Clara, a professional photographer in her early 30s, with a camera slung over her shoulder and a look of awe in her eyes. She had heard about the cottage from a friend and sought it out, hoping to capture the untouched beauty of the cliffs and sea. Martha welcomed Clara inside, offering her a cup of hot coffee. Clara explained how she had spent the last few years traveling the world, capturing bustling cities, sprawling landscapes, and the vibrant colors of life. But lately, she had been drawn to quieter, more intimate places, the kind that didn't scream for attention, but whispered their beauty softly. She had come to the cottage hoping to find that kind of peace. For the next few days, Clara roamed the cliffs, the camera always in her hand. She woke before dawn to photograph the sunrise, capturing the pink and orange hues as they lit up the sky and reflected on the water. In the afternoons, she wandered the shore, taking pictures of the tide pools, the way the light hit the rocks, and the gentle curve of the waves as they came in and out. But what Clara found most captivating wasn't the grand, sweeping views. It was the small moments of stillness. The way the light filtered through the trees in Martha's garden, the way the wind softly ruffled the wildflowers by the fence, the delicate dance of shadows on the stone walls of the cottage. She found beauty in the quiet details, in the spaces between movement. One evening, after a long day of photography, Clara shared her work with Martha. As they looked through the photos together, Martha was struck by the way Clara had captured the essence of the cottage, its simplicity, its peace, its quiet magic. "You have a way of seeing things that others might miss," Martha said, admiring a photograph of the cottage bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Clara smiled. "I think it's because I've spent so long trying to capture the noise of the world. Now, I'm more interested in the silence." Before she left, Clara printed one of her favorite photos and gave it to Martha as a gift. A picture of the cottage, its stone walls framed by the sea and sky, the essence of serenity captured in a single shot. It was a reminder of the quiet beauty that could be found in the simplest places. The Nomadic Bike Rider. It was early spring when Caleb arrived at the cottage, his presence as unexpected as the wildflowers blooming along the cliffside. He was a man in his early 40s, with a rugged look and a quiet energy that seemed to mirror the sea itself. His bike, a sturdy touring model, was covered in dust from miles of travel, and strapped to the back was a small tent and a few essential supplies. Caleb had been riding along untouched coastlines for years, seeking out the places that most people never visited. He lived a minimalist lifestyle, camping for weeks or even months at a time, relying on what he found: fish he caught from the sea, wild herbs and fruits he foraged along the way. For Caleb, life was about simplicity, about stripping away the noise of modern life and living as close to the earth as possible. Martha spotted Caleb as he parked his bike at the edge of the garden fence, his eyes scanning the horizon with the same appreciation she had felt when she first returned to the cottage. He had heard about the cottage from a fellow traveler, someone who had told him it was a place where the road ended and peace began. When Martha invited Caleb inside, he accepted with a smile, grateful for the offer of shelter, though he was used to living out of his tent. Over a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh fish, Caleb shared his story. He had been on the road for almost a decade, traveling by bike from one remote coastal area to another. His journey wasn't about finding a destination, but about experiencing the untouched beauty of the world's wild places. "I've always been drawn to the sea," Caleb said, his voice calm but firm. "There's something about the way it's both constant and ever-changing. It reminds me that life is supposed to flow, not stay stuck in one place." Martha listened, fascinated by Caleb's philosophy. He spoke of the shores he had visited, the desolate beaches where the only sounds were the crashing of waves and the call of seabirds, the hidden coves where he had pitched his tent and spent weeks living off the land. His lifestyle was one of total freedom, but also one of solitude. For the next few weeks, Caleb set up his tent near the cottage, close enough to enjoy the hospitality Martha offered, but far enough that he could still maintain the sense of independence he cherished. He spent his days fishing along the rocky shores, gathering edible plants, and riding his bike to explore the surrounding cliffs. In the evenings, he returned to the cottage, where he and Martha shared simple meals and deep conversations about the meaning of life, freedom, and the call of the sea. One afternoon, as they walked along the cliffs, Caleb spoke of his future. "I've been thinking lately about slowing down," he admitted. "Maybe finding a place like this, somewhere I can stay for longer. I love the road, but there's something about this place. It feels like I could stop here." Martha smiled, understanding completely. "The sea has a way of making you feel like you're both lost and found at the same time," she said. Caleb nodded, silent for a moment as he watched the waves roll in. "Maybe it's time to set down roots," he mused. "But I don't think I'll ever stop wandering, even if it's just in my mind." By the time Caleb packed up his tent and strapped it to his bike, he had decided to continue his journey. But now he had a destination in mind. He promised Martha he would return, perhaps not to stay, but to visit. The cottage, like the wild shores he loved, had become a part of him. As he rode away, the wind tugging at his clothes and the sound of the sea in his ears, Caleb felt a sense of peace. The cottage had given him something he hadn't realized he needed, a reminder that even in a life of constant movement, there were places where the heart could find rest. The young traveler with no destination. The last traveler to visit the cottage was a young woman named Mia, a 20-something backpacker who had been traveling the world with no fixed destination. She arrived at the cottage with little more than a worn-out backpack and a heart full of wanderlust. Martha welcomed her, as she had done with all the others, offering her a warm bed and a place to rest. Mia had been traveling for years, moving from place to place, never settling down. She was searching for something, but she didn't know what it was. "I've been everywhere," Mia confessed one evening, sitting by the fire, "but I still feel like I haven't found what I'm looking for." Martha smiled knowingly. "Maybe you're not supposed to find it yet." During her stay, Mia realized that the beauty of life wasn't always in the search, but in the moments of stillness. She spent her days exploring the cliffs, swimming in the sea, and simply being present in the moment. The cottage, with its calm and serenity, gave her the pause she needed to reflect on her journey. By the time Mia left, she hadn't found the answers she had been searching for, but she had found something more valuable, a sense of peace with not knowing. She hugged Martha tightly before leaving, promising to return one day when her travels brought her back to this quiet corner of the world. A cottage of endless stories. The cottage by the sea had long since ceased being just a home for Martha. It had become a place where travelers from all walks of life could find what they were searching for, whether that was peace, adventure, or simply a quiet moment of reflection. With each visitor, the cottage collected new stories, new memories, and new connections. Martha, who had once sought solitude, now cherished the company of those who found their way to her doorstep. And while the travelers came and went, leaving behind pieces of their lives, the cottage stood firm, a beacon of serenity and warmth above the shore. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sea in shades of gold and pink, Martha sat on the porch, her heart full of the stories she had been gifted. The cottage, with its stone walls and thatched roof, had become a place where time slowed, where the ocean's song filled the silence, and where each new visitor added another layer to the tapestry of its history. And in the stillness of the evening, Martha knew that the stories would continue, each one as unique and beautiful as the travelers who brought them. She smiled to herself, thinking about when the next traveler might arrive, imagining their story, their life, and what they would share with her. As the gentle breeze carried the scent of the sea, Martha made her way to bed, her mind drifting into dreams. In her dream, she saw a traveler at the door, a new story waiting to unfold. Her heart fluttered with quiet anticipation and excitement, her mind weaving possibilities of who they might be and what adventures they would bring. With a peaceful sigh, Martha slowly sank into sleep, her dreams filled with the beauty of the sea, the warmth of the cottage, and the promise of new stories yet to be told. She was content, wrapped in the comfort of knowing that the next chapter, like every chapter before it, would arrive in its own time. The cottage, a home of endless stories, would always be waiting just as she was. Thank you for spending your time with us at the cottage by the sea. We hope you've enjoyed the ambience and the traveler's stories, and that your time here has brought you peace and relaxation. If you found it to be a good bedtime story, consider liking and feel free to share it with your friends and family so they can experience the serenity of the cottage too. And we hope you're subscribed so you don't miss out on future journeys. We can't wait to welcome you back to this beautiful shore soon,